The air was crisp that morning in a quiet corner of a small town in Ohio. The kind of morning where the sky was a soft, milky blue and the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted from homes that had just begun to stir. The town wasn't much, just a scattering of houses, a couple of diners, a gas station that had seen better days, and a main street lined with shops that closed early. But it had something special. A warmth, a heart, a sense of belonging. That warmth, however, had never reached the back alley behind Miller's grocery. The dumpster sat there like a forgotten relic, surrounded by stray bits of discarded cardboard and the occasional plastic bag rustling in the wind. A place where most turned a blind eye. A place where something was waiting to be found. Sam Harper never took this alleyway. He wasn't a man who wandered without purpose. But that day, something nudged him. Maybe it was the way the morning sun caught the rusted metal of the dumpster, glinting just enough to catch his eye. Maybe it was the faint sound, something barely there, almost drowned out by the breeze. A whimper. He paused, hands stuffed into the pockets of his worn-out jacket, debating with himself. He had places to be, things to do. But that sound, it wasn't the wind, it wasn't some stray cat. It was something else. Curiosity finally got the better of him, and he stepped forward, his boots crunching against gravel and broken leaves. He reached for the heavy lid of the dumpster and lifted it, bracing himself for the worst. The smell hit him first. Rotting produce, stale bread, the unmistakable scent of something that had been left to decay. But then, through the jumble of trash, he saw it. A small, barely moving curlet up in the corner like it had given up. The fur was matted, tangled with filth, patches missing entirely. Its ribs showed through its frail frame, rising and falling with the shallowest of breaths. And its eyes, when they flickered open at the sound of the lid being moved, held something that made Sam's chest tighten. Fear, exhaustion, and the faintest glimmer of hope. "Hey there, buddy," Sam murmured, keeping his voice gentle. He crouched down, ignoring the rancid smell. The dog flinched but didn't have the strength to move away. "You're all right now." He hesitated only a moment before reaching in carefully, his hands steady as he scooped up the frail body. It barely weighed anything. The dog gave a soft, weak whimper, but it didn't resist, as if it knew, somehow instinctively, that Sam wasn't going to hurt it. That maybe, just maybe, it had been found by the right person. He cradled the dog against his chest, feeling the bones beneath the patchy fur. It trembled against him, more from weakness than cold. He could feel the slow beat of its heart, too faint for comfort. Sam walked swiftly, his mind already racing ahead. There was only one place to go. Dr. Lucy Bennett had been the town vet for years, the kind of woman who never turned away an animal in need, no matter how dire the case. If anyone could help this dog, it was her. The bell over the clinic's door jingled as Sam pushed inside. The warmth of the building wrapped around him instantly, the scent of antiseptic and fresh linens replacing the stench of the dumpster. A young woman behind the reception desk looked up, her eyes widening as she saw what he carried. "Dr. Bennett," she called, rising from her chair. Footsteps sounded down the hall, and within moments, Lucy appeared. She was in her mid-40s, her dark blonde hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, her expression sharp and focused. But when she saw the dog in Sam's arms, something softened in her gaze. Without a word, she motioned for him to follow her into the exam room. He laid the dog gently on the table, stepping back as Lucy went to work. Her fingers were quick but careful as she examined the fragile body, pressing lightly against the ribs, checking the gums, lifting each tiny paw with the kind of tenderness that came from years of practice. "He was in a dumpster," Sam said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Barely breathing when I found him." Lucy nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. She grabbed a stethoscope, listening to the dog's heart, her brows furrowing as she did. Sam watched her face, searching for some kind of sign, something to tell him whether there was hope or not. After what felt like an eternity, she pulled back, sighing. "He's in bad shape," she admitted. "Severely malnourished, dehydrated. His body's weak, but his heart." She glanced at Sam then, her expression shifting. "It's still fighting." Something inside Sam loosened, like a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. So he's got a chance? Lucy gave a small smile. With the right care? Yeah, he's got a chance. Relief flooded through him, but it was quickly replaced by something else. Responsibility. He hadn't planned on this. He wasn't a dog person, wasn't someone who brought home strays. But standing there, looking at the little dog lying on the table, his body barely more than skin and bones, Sam knew one thing for sure. He wasn't leaving this dog behind. Lucy must have seen it in his face because she nodded, already pulling together a plan. We'll start with fluids, get some nutrition in him slowly. He's got a long road ahead, but if you're willing to see it through... I am, Sam said without hesitation. He didn't know why, but he meant it. Lucy smiled, a real one this time. Then let's get to work. And just like that, a life that had almost been lost in the shadows of an alleyway was about to take its first step towards something better. The hours that followed were a blur of quiet urgency. Lucy worked with the efficiency of someone who had done this 100 times before, though even Sam could tell she was being extra careful with the dog. There was something fragile about the way it lay there, too weak to do much more than exist. And yet, there was something else too. Something that hadn't been completely extinguished. Sam stood back, watching as Lucy set up an IV, threading the line with practiced hands. The dog didn't fight her, didn't flinch, just lay there in exhausted acceptance. Every now and then, its eyes would flicker open, glancing around before slipping shut again. Sam wasn't sure if it even understood what was happening, if it knew that it had been rescued. He's lucky you found him when you did, Lucy murmured as she taped the IV in place. Another day out there, maybe even a few more hours, and he might not have made it. The words sent a chill through Sam. He hadn't thought about that, about how close he'd come to walking right past the alley that morning. He had almost ignored that small sound, had almost convinced himself he had more important things to do. And if he had, that would have been it. The thought made his stomach tighten. What now? He asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Lucy pulled off her gloves and tossed them in the bin, rubbing her hands together like she was rolling the weight of the situation between her fingers. First thing is stabilizing him. The IV will help with that. We'll start him on small portions of food soon, real small, just enough to ease his system into working again. Too much too fast, and it could do more harm than good. She gestured toward the dog. He needs rest, warmth, and careful feeding, and he needs someone to stick with him through it. She glanced at Sam, and he already knew where this was going. He wasn't sure why, but he wasn't surprised. I can keep him here for a few days, monitor him, Lucy continued, but he's going to need long-term care, more than I can give with all the animals coming in and out of this clinic. Sam let out a slow breath, rubbing the back of his neck. He wasn't an impulsive guy. He wasn't someone who made decisions without thinking them through. But there wasn't really a decision to be made, was there? I'll take him, he said before she could even ask. Lucy studied him for a moment like she was making sure he really meant it. Then she smiled. All right then, let's get this little guy through the night and we'll see where we're at tomorrow. Sam nodded, settling into a chair by the exam table, crossing his arms as he looked at the frail body lying there. It was strange how quickly something could become your responsibility. How one decision, one moment of stopping, could change everything. The dog shifted slightly, its paw twitching, like it was caught somewhere between a dream and waking. Sam didn't know much about dogs, but he knew one thing. This one wasn't going back to the streets. Not ever again. Morning came slowly, the clinic quiet except for the occasional rustling from the back rooms where other animals were kept. Sam had dozed off in the chair at some point, but he wasn't sure for how long. His back ached, his neck was stiff, and the unfamiliar scent of antiseptic clung to his clothes. Lucy walked in, coffee in hand, and smirked at him. Didn't peg you for the type to pull an all-nighter over a dog. Sam ran a hand down his face, feeling the rough stubble along his jaw. Yeah, well, guess I'm full of surprises. Lucy chuckled and set the coffee down before moving over to check on the dog. She moved slowly, testing his response, checking his vitals. Sam leaned forward, watching closely. He made it through the night, Lucy said, a note of approval in her voice. That's a good sign. Sam let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. So what's next? He's still weak, but we'll start with some food. See if he can keep it down." She turned to grab a small dish, filling it with a soft, bland mixture. If he eats, that's another step in the right direction. She set the dish down in front of the dog. At first, there was no reaction, just the steady rise and fall of its thin frame. But then, as if sensing something new, the dog's nose twitched. Slowly, it cracked one eye open, then the other. Its head lifted slightly, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something beyond exhaustion. Hunger. Lucy nudged the dish closer. The boy sniffed tentatively, then, with a surprising amount of effort, licked at the food. It was slow, weak, but it was something. "There we go," Lucy murmured. "That's what we want." Sam watched in silence, something shifting inside him. He had spent his whole life focused on things that made sense. Work, responsibilities, tasks that had clear objectives. But this was different, and this wasn't just about doing what was expected. This was about doing something that mattered. The dog finished what little it could manage, then rested its head back down, clearly drained, but a little more alive than before. Lucy looked at Sam, and for the first time since he'd walked into the clinic, he felt like he was actually ready for what came next. "He's going to need a name," Lucy said casually, watching him. Sam glanced down at the little dog, thinking, a name. That meant something permanent, didn't it? A commitment, a promise. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Chance," he said, "because that's what he's getting." Lucy smiled, nodding her approval. Chance it is. And just like that, the dog that had been left to fade away in a dumpster had a future, a name, and most importantly, a home. The drive home felt longer than usual. Sam had carried Chance out of the clinic wrapped in a soft blanket Lucy had given him, and now the dog rested quietly on the passenger seat of his old pickup. The occasional jostle of the road made him stir, but he was too weak to do much more than shift slightly before settling again. Sam kept glancing over, half expecting Chance to disappear, like this whole thing had been some strange dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was real. And now he had a dog. It wasn't that Sam disliked animals. He had just never been the kind of guy who owned one. Growing up, his family had never had pets. His parents were practical people, never ones to take on more responsibility than necessary. A pet, in their eyes, was just another thing to worry about. Sam had carried that mindset into adulthood, convinced that his life was too structured, too full of work to make room for something like this. And yet, here he was, a half-starved dog sitting next to him, heading home like he had belonged there all along. His house sat on the edge of town, a modest place with a decent yard and a porch that creaked when you stepped on the wrong spot. It wasn't much, but it was his. He pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He had no idea what he was doing. What did dogs even need beyond food, water, and a place to sleep? Chance let out a weak sigh, and Sam took that as a sign to get moving. He scooped the dog up carefully, mindful of how light he felt, and carried him inside. The house was quiet. Sam had always liked that about it. But now the silence felt different. It wasn't just quiet, it was empty. That realization settled somewhere deep inside him. Though he pushed it away for now, he had things to do. He set Chance down on an old blanket and near him at a couch, making sure he was comfortable before heading to the kitchen. A quick rummage through the fridge and cabinets told him he had absolutely nothing fit for a dog to eat. That meant a trip back into town. Sam sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. He had barely had time to wrap his head around all of this, and now he was already adding more to his to-do list. But when he glanced back at Chance, saw the way the little dog's ribs stuck out, the way his fur was still dull and patchy, Sam knew he couldn't put it off. He grabbed his keys and headed out. The pet store wasn't a place Sam had ever stepped foot in before, and he felt out of place the moment he walked inside. The shelves were stocked with more dog food options than he knew what to do with. And then there were the toys, beds, leashes, and all sorts of things he had never even considered. How much did a dog really need? "Can I help you find something?" The voice startled him, and he turned to see a young woman wearing a store apron, her name tag reading Maggie. She had a friendly smile, but her eyes flicked over him like she could tell he was completely lost. Yeah," Sam admitted. "I just got a dog. He's not in great shape. Need food and whatever else he might need." Maggie's expression shifted into something more knowing. Rescue? Something like that. She nodded and motioned for him to follow. All right, let's start with the basics. Sam spent more time in that store than he had planned, walking out with bags of food, a soft dog bed, a collar and leash, and a few other things Maggie had insisted were essential. He wasn't sure if he had been scammed into buying more than he needed, but at least now he had something to work with. When he got home, Chance hadn't moved much from where he had left him. His eyes cracked open when Sam set the bags down, and for the first time, there was something behind them that looked a little more aware. "Got you some stuff," Sam said, feeling a little ridiculous, talking to a dog like he could understand. He pulled out the food first, pouring a small amount into a dish and setting it in front of him. "Figured you could use a decent meal." Chance sniffed at it tentatively before taking a slow bite. He still ate cautiously, like he wasn't sure if the food was really for him, but after a few moments, he picked up the pace. It wasn't much, but it was something. Sam sat back and watched him, a strange sense of satisfaction settling in. It wasn't like fixing up an old truck or finishing a project at work. This was different. This was watching something come back to life, piece by piece. The next few days were slow but steady. Chance was still weak, but he was eating regularly, drinking water and resting. He was starting to lift his head more, eyes following Sam whenever he moved around the house. And then came the moment Sam hadn't expected at all. It was late, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old wood floors. Sam was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, when he felt something against his leg. He looked down to see Chance standing there, wobbly but determined. "You're up," Sam said, surprised. He hadn't seen Chance make the effort to move on his own much yet, but here he was, staring up at him like he had made up his mind about something. Then slowly, Chance crawled onto the couch beside him, settling down against his side. Sam froze. It wasn't like he had never been around dogs before, but this was different. This wasn't just a pig looking for a comfortable place to sleep. This was something else entirely. It was trust. Sam hesitated before reaching down, running a hand gently over the rough patches of Chance's fur. The little dog let out a soft sigh, curling up just a little closer. For the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel quite so empty. The days turned into a routine. It wasn't something Sam had planned, but before he knew it, his life had started to shape itself around Chance. Morning started with carefully portioned meals, the dog eating a little more each time, his strength growing in increments so small, they were easy to miss if you weren't looking for them. Then came the short walks in the yard, Chance still hesitant, still unsure, but moving nonetheless. The first time Sam took him outside, Chance had frozen on the porch, staring at the open space like it was something foreign. Sam had knelt down beside him, waiting. "It's all right, buddy. Just take your time." Chance had hesitated, paws shifting uncertainly against the worn wood. Then, ever so cautiously, he had stepped forward, one slow movement at a time. Sam didn't rush him. He let Chance feel the grass under his paws, let him take in the smells, let him figure it out on his own terms. It wasn't long before Lucy called to check in. Sam had expected her to say something about bringing Chance back to the clinic for another round of tests, but instead she had just asked, "How's he doing?" Sam had glanced over at Chance, curled up in the dog bed he had stubbornly ignored for the first 2 days, but had finally started using. "He's getting better," he said simply. Lucy had hummed approvingly. "I had a feeling you'd be good for him." Sam wasn't sure what to say to that. He wasn't sure how any of this had happened, how he had gone from a guy who kept to himself to someone who now had a dog depending on him. But it didn't feel like an accident. The first real test came about a week later. Chance had gotten comfortable enough in the house, but the world outside was still something he approached with caution. Sam had taken him on short walks, never pushing him too hard, just letting him go as far as he was willing. But today, as they walked the familiar path around the yard, Chance suddenly stopped. Sam followed his gaze and saw what had caught his attention. It was the old metal trash bins near the side of the house. He hadn't thought much about them before, but now he saw what Chance saw. A dumpster. Not exactly the same, but close enough. Chance's body tensed, his ears flattening. His tail, which had started to lift ever so slightly in the last few days, tucked tight against his frail frame. He took a step back, then another. Sam knelt beside him, his voice steady. "Hey, it's okay. You're not there anymore." Chance didn't move. His breathing had picked up, his eyes locked onto the bins like they might swallow him whole. Sam didn't push him. He didn't pull the leash, didn't tell him to come on or just get over it. Instead, he just sat there with him, letting him take his time. He wasn't sure how long they stayed like that, but eventually, Chance took a breath. He didn't move forward, but he didn't back away any further either. That was enough. Sam stood, giving the leash a small, reassuring tug. "Come on, buddy, let's head back inside." Chance hesitated for another second before finally turning away. As they walked back toward the house, Sam glanced down at him, feeling something settle deep in his chest. It wasn't just about feeding him or giving him a place to sleep. It was about showing him that he was safe now, that the world wasn't just the place that had abandoned him. A few nights later, Sam found himself sitting on the porch, staring at the stars while Chance dozed beside him. It was peaceful, the quiet wrapping around them like an old blanket. Sam reached down, running a hand absently over Chance's fur, feeling how different he felt now compared to the first time he had picked him up. There was more weight to him, more warmth. He hadn't expected any of this. He hadn't expected to care this much. Chance let out a content sigh, shifting slightly so he was pressed just a little closer against Sam's leg. For the first time in years, Sam didn't feel alone. The next morning started like any other. Sam was pouring his first cup of coffee when he felt eyes on him. He turned to see Chance sitting just a few feet away, watching him. It wasn't unusual for the dog to be nearby, but this was different. He was sitting up, his ears slightly perked, his tail curled against his side. There was something expectant in his posture, something that made Sam set his coffee down. "You hungry, buddy?" Chance didn't move at first, but when Sam stepped toward the kitchen counter, the dog's tail gave a faint wag. It was the first time Sam had seen it move like that, and it stopped him in his tracks. He wasn't sure why it hit him so hard, but it did. He swallowed down whatever that feeling was and grabbed Chance's food, scooping some into his bowl. As soon as he set it down, Chance went to it without hesitation. He wasn't picking at his food anymore. He was eating with a kind of quiet confidence, like he knew it was his now, like he belonged here. Sam exhaled and leaned against the counter, rubbing a hand over his jaw. He'd never been the sentimental type, but this was getting to him. The morning passed quietly. After breakfast, Sam went about his usual routine, fixing a loose board on the porch, running a few errands in town. When he got back, Chance was waiting by the door. He didn't bark or whine, but his tail gave that same small wag as soon as Sam stepped inside. "Miss me?" Sam joked, but the weight in his chest said maybe it wasn't just a joke. Chance followed him as he moved through the house, staying close but not needy. Sam liked that about him. He wasn't pushy, wasn't loud. He just wanted to be near. That evening, as Sam sat on the couch, flipping through channels, Chance did something he hadn't done before. Instead of curling up on his dog bed, he hopped up onto the couch beside him. It wasn't graceful. His thin legs wobbled, and he had to scramble a little. But he made it. Sam smirked. "Getting comfortable, huh?" Chance curled up, pressing against Sam's side, his small body warm against him. Sam hesitated for only a second before resting his hand on Chance's back. The dog let out a soft sigh, settling completely. Sam stared at the screen, not really watching whatever was playing. He had always been fine on his own, or at least that's what he had told himself. But now, sitting here with Chance tucked up beside him, he wondered if maybe he had been wrong about that. Maybe, just maybe, he hadn't even known how lonely he really was. Sam had never considered himself much of a dog person, but Chance had a way of settling into his life without effort. The house, once quiet and predictable, now had an unspoken rhythm that revolved around the little dog. Chance had started following him from room to room, never demanding attention, but always there, always present. It was strange how quickly Sam had gotten used to it, how normal it felt to have another living being sharing his space. The mornings became their time. Sam would sip his coffee on the porch, Chance curled up by his feet, listening to the town waking up around them. It wasn't a big town, not the kind that had much excitement, but Sam had always liked that about it. He liked the way people knew each other, the way life moved at its own steady pace. And now, for the first time in a long time, he liked having someone to share it with. A few days later, Sam took Chance back to Lucy's clinic for a checkup. The dog had been eating better, moving more, even wagging his tail every now and then. But Sam wanted to make sure there wasn't anything they had missed. Lucy greeted them with a smile, motioning for Sam to bring Chance into the exam room. "Look at you," she murmured, crouching down to scratch gently behind Chance's ears. "You've put on some weight." Sam hadn't really thought about it, but now that he looked, he could see the difference. Chance's ribs weren't quite as pronounced. His fur looked a little shinier, and his eyes, once dull and lifeless, had a little spark in them now. Lucy ran through the usual checks, listening to his heart, checking his reflexes. "He's making good progress," she said finally, looking up at Sam. "Still got a ways to go, but whatever you're doing, keep at it." Sam nodded, feeling a quiet kind of pride settle in his chest. He hadn't done much, not really. Just fed him, given him a place to rest, made sure he felt safe. But maybe that was enough. On the way back home, Sam decided to take a different route, one that led past the park on the edge of town. He hadn't taken Chance there yet, wasn't sure if he was ready for it. But as they drove past, Chance lifted his head, ears perking up slightly at the sight of the open space. Sam hesitated, then made a split-second decision, turning into the parking lot. "All right, let's see how you do," he murmured. He clipped on the leash and opened the door. Chance jumped down onto the pavement, looking around cautiously. Sam let him take his time, walking slow, letting him sniff the air. It was quiet, only a few people out this early in the day. A jogger ran past and Chance tensed, but he didn't back away. They made their way toward a grassy patch near a bench, and for a moment, Chance just stood there staring. Then hesitantly, he took a step forward, and then another. Sam watched as the dog lifted his head, feeling the breeze, letting himself take it all in. And then, to Sam's surprise, Chance lowered his nose to the ground and started sniffing. Curiously, it wasn't much, but it was something. Sam sat down on the bench, letting the leash slacken slightly, watching Chance explore. He wasn't bounding through the grass like some dogs would, but he was moving, his tail giving the faintest of wags. Sam exhaled, feeling something loosen in his chest. This was what it was all about, wasn't it? Seeing Chance not just survive, but live. After a while, Chance trotted back to him, settling at his feet. Sam reached down, scratching gently behind his ears. "Not so bad, huh?" Chance leaned into the touch, his eyes half closing in contentment. Sam smiled. Maybe they'd make a habit of this. That night, as they settled in at home, Sam realized something. He wasn't just taking care of Chance anymore. They were taking care of each other. Boing. As the days passed, Sam started noticing even more small changes. Chance was beginning to trust more, his steps a little lighter, his movements less cautious. He still had his moments. Loud noises made him flinch, and certain places in town seemed to unsettle him. But he was making progress. And for the first time, Sam found himself looking forward to coming home. One evening, Sam sat on the porch watching Chance sniff around the yard. The little dog had started venturing a bit farther, no longer sticking to the same small area. Sam took a sip of his beer and smirked. "You're getting brave, huh?" Chance glanced at him, but kept moving, nose down, tail flicking slightly. Sam had never thought he'd be the kind of guy to just sit and watch a dog explore the grass, but here he was, enjoying the simple moment. Then suddenly, Chance froze. His ears twitched, his body stiffening. Sam sat up straighter. "What is it?" A rustling sound came from behind the shed. Sam narrowed his eyes, setting his beer down and standing up. Chance didn't move, but his body was tense, like he was waiting for something to happen. Then, out from behind the shed, a raccoon waddled into view. Sam let out a breath and chuckled. "Just a raccoon, buddy. Relax." But Chance didn't relax. Instead, something shifted in him. His tail rose just slightly, and then, to Sam's utter shock, he let out a small, uncertain bark. Sam blinked. "Did you just—" Chance barked again, slightly more confident this time. The raccoon, unimpressed, scurried off into the bushes, leaving Chance standing there, ears perked, tail wagging slightly. Sam laughed. "Well, look at you, thinking you're some kind of guard dog now, huh?" Chance turned, trotting back toward him, and Sam knelt down, ruffling the fur behind his ears. "Not bad, buddy, not bad at all." That night, as Chance curled up beside him on the couch, Sam thought back to the first time he had seen him. Weak, shaking, barely holding on. Now here he was, barking at raccoons, finding his confidence, making himself at home. Sam exhaled and leaned back against the cushions, resting a hand on Chance's back. "Guess we're in this together, huh?" Chance let out a sleepy edge, shifting closer. Sam smiled. Yeah, they were definitely in this together. The morning after Chance's first bark, Sam woke up to find the dog already waiting for him by the door. He was sitting upright, alert, his tail giving a few hesitant wags. Sam rubbed the sleep from his eyes and grinned. "You ready for something new today?" Chance's ears perked slightly, his expression cautious but interested. Sam grabbed the leash and clipped it on. He had been thinking about taking Chance on a longer walk, maybe even through the woods behind the house. It wasn't a dense forest, just a stretch of land with winding trails, but it felt like a place where Chance could get a taste of real freedom without overwhelming him. As they stepped outside, the early morning air was crisp, and the town was still waking up. Sam led Chance down the usual path past the yard, but instead of turning toward the street, he guided him toward the trees. Chance hesitated at first, his paws stopping at the edge of the trail. Sam crouched down beside him. "It's just trees, buddy. Nothing to be afraid of." Chance sniffed the air, taking a step forward. And then another. Sam didn't rush him. They walked slowly, the ground covered in fallen leaves that crunched underfoot. Chance was sniffing everything, his tail flicking side to side in curiosity. For the first time, Sam saw the remnants of the way Chance must have been before he was abandoned. Curious, eager, wanting to explore. A squirrel darted across the path, and Chance jumped back slightly but didn't bolt. Instead, he watched it disappear up a tree, tilting his head as if considering whether he should chase after it. Sam chuckled. "Don't think you're quite up for squirrel chasing just yet." They walked deeper into the woods, finding a small clearing where sunlight filtered through the branches. Sam sat down on an old tree stump, letting Chance take in his surroundings. The dog circled the clearing a few times before finally settling near Sam's feet. He was panting lightly, but there was no fear in his body, no hesitation. Just Abdum, enjoying the outdoors. Sam reached down, scratching behind Chance's ears. "You're doing good, buddy." Chance leaned into his touch, letting out a small sigh. That evening, after their adventure in the woods, Sam decided to test something else. He had picked up a tennis ball earlier that day, not sure if Chance would be interested in toys yet. He rolled it across the living room floor, watching as Chance eyed it suspiciously. "Come on, it won't bite." Chance sniffed at the ball, then nudged it slightly with his nose. When it rolled away, he took a cautious step forward and tapped it again. Sam grinned. "That's it." He picked up the ball and tossed it a few feet away. Chance watched it land, then glanced back at Sam as if unsure what was supposed to happen next. "You can go get it, you know." Chance took a few hesitant steps toward the ball. Then, after another glance at Sam, picked it up in his mouth. He stood there for a moment, holding it, before walking back and dropping it at Sam's feet. Sam stared at him. You actually brought it back?" Chance sat down, his tail thumping once against the floor. Sam chuckled. "Well, guess we're playing fetch now." They spent the next 10 minutes rolling and tossing the ball, Chance retrieving it every time, his movements becoming more confident with each round. When he finally flopped down beside Sam, panting but happy, Sam scratched behind his ears and smiled. "You keep surprising me, you know that?" Chance rested his head against Sam's leg, his body warm and relaxed. Sam exhaled and leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. He had never planned on any of this, never thought he needed it. But now, with Chance beside him, he couldn't imagine life without him. The following morning, Sam decided to take Chance on a trip to the local pet store. He had already gotten him the basics, but something told him Chance was ready for a little more. A proper bed, some new toys, maybe even some treats. Sam had never been the type to spoil anyone, but Chance had been through enough. They pulled into the parking lot, and Sam turned to look at him. "All right, bud, let's see how you do in a store." Inside, Chance stuck close to Sam's side, his head swiveling at the sounds and smells surrounding him. It was a lot, but he wasn't panicking. If anything, he seemed fascinated. Sam grabbed a cart and started down the aisles, keeping a slow pace. He picked up a plush dog bed, tossing it into the cart, then grabbed a few chew toys and a bag of treats. "What do you think of this one?" he asked, holding up a stuffed bear with a squeaker inside. Chance sniffed it, then gave it a cautious lick. Sam smirked and dropped it into the cart. "Guess that's a yes." At the checkout, the cashier, a young woman with a bright smile, glanced down at Chance. "He's adorable. What's his name?" "Chance." "That's a great name." She handed Sam his receipt, then crouched down to give Chance a gentle pat. "You're a lucky guy, Chance." Sam thought about that on the drive home. Lucky. He supposed Chance was lucky to have been found that day in the alley, to have made it through. But if he was being honest, Sam felt like he was the lucky one. That night, after setting up Chance's new bed in the corner of the living room, Sam sat back and watched as the dog sniffed it curiously before stepping onto it. He turned in a few slow circles before finally lying down, his tail giving one satisfied wag. Sam smiled. "Yeah, that's yours now." Chance let out a sleepy sigh, and for the first time since Sam had brought him home, he seemed to fully relax, as if he knew, really knew, he was staying for good. The next morning, Sam awoke to the familiar sound of soft paws patting across the wooden floor. He opened his eyes just in time to see Chance trot over to the side of the bed and sit down, his head tilting slightly. It had become part of their routine, Chance waiting for him to wake up, tail thumping softly against the floor. All right, Sam groaned, rubbing a hand over his face before swinging his legs over the edge of the bed. "Give me a second." Chance's tail wagged a little faster as Sam stood, stretching his arms overhead. The dog had settled into his home so naturally that Sam sometimes forgot it had barely been a few weeks since he had rescued him. The hesitancy Chance once had, the cautious steps, the uncertainty in his eyes was fading, replaced by something stronger. Something that looked a lot like happiness. After a quick breakfast, Sam grabbed Chance's leash. "How about we switch things up today?" he asked, glancing down at him. "Think you're ready for a walk through town?" Chance flicked his ears, but didn't back away. That was a good sign. The few times Sam had taken him through busier areas, Chance had been wary but not fearful. Today he'd see how far they could go. As they walked into town, the morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh coffee and warm bread from the bakery on Main Street. Chance kept close, his leash slack but his movements controlled. He was paying attention, taking in the sights and sounds around him. A few cars rolled by, and though he flinched slightly at the noise, he didn't stop moving. They passed the general store, then the diner where Sam usually grabbed coffee. Outside, a group of regulars sat at the patio tables, sipping from their mugs and chatting about everything and nothing. "Morning, Sam," one of them called out, an older man named Joe who had lived in the town longer than anyone. His eyes drifted to Chance. "Who's this?" "This is Chance," Sam said, giving the leash a gentle tug to encourage the dog forward. "Picked him up a few weeks back." Joe chuckled. "Well, he looks a hell of a lot better now. Lucky dog." Sam smirked, the words echoing what the cashier at the pet store had said. Lucky. He glanced down at Chance, who was sniffing curiously at a nearby planeter. Maybe he was lucky, but again, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he was the one who had been given something he hadn't known he needed. They continued down the street, pausing occasionally when Chance seemed overwhelmed by something new. Sam never rushed him. He let the dog decide when he was ready to move. By the time they reached the small park at the end of Main Street, Chance's tail was up, his ears relaxed. He was doing better than Sam had expected. They took a break at one of the benches, and Sam let Chance explore the grassy area in front of them. He watched as the dog sniffed at the ground, his tail wagging in lazy arcs. It was strange, the sense of peace that settled over Sam as he sat there, watching this little creature he had once found on the brink of giving up, now finding joy in the simplest things. "You've come a long way, buddy," Sam murmured. Chance looked up at his tongue lolling out slightly, and Sam swore it almost looked like a smile. As they walked back home, Sam made a mental note to bring Chance into town more often. The dog had proven that he could handle it, and more than that, he had enjoyed it. Maybe next time they'd even stop by the diner for a coffee. Maybe slowly but surely, Chance was becoming as much a part of this town as Sam was. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sam sat on the porch, a beer in his hand, while Chance curled up beside his chair. The night was quiet, save for the occasional chirp of crickets and the distant hum of cars on the highway. For the first time in a long time, Sam felt like he wasn't just going through the motions of life. He wasn't just passing the days, he was living them. And all because of a joy he hadn't even been looking for. Over the next week, Chance continued to grow more comfortable. He was gaining weight at a steady pace, his coat looking healthier with each passing day. He had started barking more, not excessively, but enough that Sam noticed. A knock on the door, the sound of another dog outside, even a distant car horn would earn a small, sharp bark, as if Chance was finally finding his voice. One evening, Sam took him back to the woods, deciding to let him off the leash for the first time. The idea made him nervous, but something told him Chance was ready. They had reached the clearing where they had sat before, and Sam crouched down beside him. "You think I can trust you?" Sam asked, unhooking the leash. Chance looked up at him, tail wagging slightly, before taking a cautious step forward. At first, Chance just stood there as if unsure what to do with his newfound freedom. Then slowly he took off, trotting a few feet before stopping to sniff at a patch of grass. Sam watched as he explored, moving farther each time but always looking back at him, as if making sure Sam was still there. After a few minutes, Sam called his name. "Chance!" The dog's head snapped up. For a second, Sam wasn't sure if he would come back. Then, with a happy bark, Chance ran straight to him, his tail wagging like it had never wagged before. Sam let out a breath and scratched behind his ears. Good boy. That night, as Chance curled up beside him on the couch, Sam realized something. He had thought he was just giving this dog a second chance, but the truth was, Chance had given him one too. The next morning, Sam found himself waking up earlier than usual, and it wasn't because of an alarm. It was because of a quiet presence near his bed, Chance sitting patiently, waiting for him to stir. When Sam opened his eyes, the dog's tail gave a soft wag, as if to say, finally. Sam groaned, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. All right, you win. Chance's ears perked up, his tail wagging a little faster as Sam got to his feet and stretched. It was almost as if he had developed an internal clock that knew exactly when it was time to start the day. After a quick breakfast, Sam grabbed Chance's leash and headed toward the door. What do you say we try another walk through town today? Maybe even stop by the diner this time. Chance tilted his head, his eyes bright with curiosity. That was enough of an answer. The air was crisp as they walked into town, the early morning rush just beginning. The scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the diner, mingling with the faint smell of rain from the night before. Chance kept close to Sam's side, his movements more confident than before. He was getting used to the world outside of the quiet home they had built together. When they reached the diner, Sam hesitated for a second before deciding to give it a try. He led Chance to the outdoor seating area where a few regulars were already sipping their coffee and reading the morning paper. Morning, Sam, Joe greeted from his usual spot near the window. His eyes flicked to Chance. Look at him, getting braver every day. Sam gave a nod and took a seat at one of the tables. Figured it was time to see how he handled sitting still in a public place. Joe chuckled. That's the real test. Chance settled beside Sam, his ears flicking at every new sound but remaining calm. A waitress came by, setting down a menu and smiling at Chance. Well, aren't you handsome? Chance gave her a cautious sniff but didn't shy away. Sam smirked. He's still getting used to compliments. Can I get you the usual? She asked. Yeah, and maybe an extra piece of bacon for him, Sam added. The waitress winked. I think we can manage that. As they waited, Sam watched Chance observe everything around him. The clatter of plates, the hum of conversation, the occasional bark of another dog passing by. It was a lot, but Chance was handling it well. He was no longer the same frail, terrified dog Sam had found in that dumpster. He was something else now, something stronger. The food arrived, and when Sam set the small piece of bacon in front of Chance, he sniffed it before taking a delicate bite. Sam chuckled. Guess we're still working on table manners. Joe shook his head. I don't think I've ever seen a dog change so fast. You sure you're not a dog whisperer, Sam? Sam shrugged. think he just needed someone to give him a chance. The rest of the morning passed in an easy rhythm. By the time they left the diner, Chance was walking with a newfound confidence. He had made it through breakfast without panic, without trying to run. That was a victory in itself. On the way home, Sam stopped by the general store to pick up a few supplies. As he browsed the aisles, Chance sat patiently by the entrance, his eyes following Sam's every move. The store owner, a woman named Linda, walked over and crouched down beside him. "You've got a good boy here," she said. Sam glanced back and smirked. "Yeah, I think so too." When they finally returned home, Chance trotted into the house like he had been doing it his whole life. Sam watched him settle into his bed by the couch, curling up with a content sigh. Sam exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face before sitting down beside him. "You really are something else, you know that?" Chance lifted his head slightly before resting it against Sam's leg. They sat there for a while, neither needing to say anything. The house was no longer just Sam's anymore. It was Chance's too. And for the first time in a long time, it felt whole. Over the next few days, Chance's confidence continued to grow. Sam noticed little things, the way he no longer hesitated before stepping outside, how he greeted the mailman with a curious sniff instead of backing away, the way he sat beside Sam on the porch every evening, watching the town settle into its nighttime hush. One evening, after finishing up some work in the garage, Sam grabbed a frisbee he had bought on impulse at the pet store. He walked back to the yard, where Chance was lounging in the grass. "What do you think, buddy, Cici?" Buddy," Sam asked, holding up the frisbee. Chance lifted his head, ears twitching with interest. Sam tossed the frisbee a few feet away, watching to see if Chance would go after it. The dog looked at it, then at Sam, as if unsure of the expectation. "Go on," Sam encouraged. After a moment's hesitation, Chance stood, trotted over to the frisbee, and sniffed it. Then, to Sam's surprise, he picked it up in his mouth and carried it back. Sam grinned. "Well, would you look at that?" He took the frisbee and threw it again, this time a little farther. Chance hesitated for only a second before chasing after it. His legs were still a little awkward, but there was something joyful about the way he moved, like he was learning how to play for the first time. By the fourth or fifth throw, Chance was running full speed, tail wagging wildly as he grabbed the frisbee and brought it back. Sam laughed. "I think we just found your new favorite game." They played until the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the yard. Finally, Chance flopped down beside Sam, panting but looking utterly content. Sam ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "You've come a long way, buddy." Chance leaned against him, letting out a satisfied huff. Sam stared up at the darkening sky. He had started this journey thinking he was saving a dog. But the more time passed, the more he realized Chance had saved him too. Sam sat on the porch with a hot cup of coffee in one hand and Chance curled up at his feet. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. The town was still waking up, and the only sounds were the distant hum of a passing car and the occasional chirp of a bird in the trees. It was peaceful, the kind of morning Sam had come to appreciate more now that Chance was part of it. He glanced down at the T, who lay with his head resting on his paws, his eyes half-lidded, but still alert. "We should take a drive today," Sam mused, sipping his coffee. "See what's outside of town for a bit." Chance's ears twitched at the sound of Sam's voice, but he didn't move. Sam smirked. "Not much of a morning dog, huh?" After breakfast, Sam grabbed his keys and motioned for Chance to follow. The dog trotted beside him, hopping into the passenger seat without hesitation. Sam chuckled as he closed the door. "You're getting comfortable with car rides now, huh?" He started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, heading toward the open road. The town disappeared in the rearview mirror, replaced by rolling hills and winding roads. Sam kept the windows cracked, letting the fresh air flow through the cab of the truck. Chance lifted his head, nose twitching as he took in the sense of the world outside. They drove for a while, passing fields dotted with grazing cows and old barns that had stood for decades. Eventually, Sam pulled over near a lake he hadn't been to in years. It was a quiet spot, one he used to visit when he needed time to think. He figured Chance might like it. He opened the door, and Chance hesitated for only a second before jumping down. Sam led him toward the water's edge, where the lake stretched out like glass, reflecting the sky above. Chance sniffed at the ground, his tail wagging as he took cautious steps forward. Sam crouched down and picked up a small stick. You think you'd chase this? He tossed it a few feet, watching as Chance's eyes followed it. The dog trotted forward, sniffed the stick, then turned back to Sam with a questioning look. Sam laughed. All right, so maybe sticks aren't your thing. Instead, Chance wandered to the shoreline, dipping a paw into the water. The coolness must have surprised him because he pulled back and shook his foot, staring at the ripples he'd made. Sam sat down on a nearby rock, watching as Chance tested the water again, this time with a little more curiosity. You've come a long way, you know that, Sam said, mostly to himself. Chance turned his head, his ears perking up slightly at the sound of Sam's voice. Then, as if deciding he was done with the water for now, he trotted over and sat beside Sam, leaning lightly against his leg. They sat there for a long time, watching the lake, listening to the quiet. Sam had spent years thinking he was fine on his own, that solitude was just part of who he was. But sitting there with Chance beside him, he wasn't so sure anymore. After a while, he sighed and stood up, brushing off his jeans. Come on, buddy, let's head home. Chance followed without hesitation, his tail wagging lazily as they walked back to the truck. As Sam pulled onto the road and drove back toward town, he realized something. Home didn't feel so empty anymore. That afternoon, Sam decided to stop by Lucy's clinic to check in on Chance's progress. The dog had come a long way, but Sam wanted to make sure he was still on the right track. As they walked inside, Lucy looked up from behind the reception desk and grinned. Well, if it isn't my two favorite patients, Sam smirked. Not sure if I count as a patient, but sure. Lucy stepped out from behind the desk and crouched down, scratching behind Chance's ears. He's looking good. You're keeping up with the nutrition plan? Yeah, he eats like a king now. Lucy nodded approvingly and led them into an exam room. As she gave Chance a checkup, Sam watched the dog stay calm, his tail even wagging slightly. When they had first come here, Chance had been a shaking, starved mess. Now he looked like a completely different dog. He's healthy, Lucy concluded, standing up. Still has some weight to gain, but he's on track. Sam let out a breath of relief. Good to hear. Lucy leaned against the counter, studying Sam for a moment. I have to say, I didn't expect you to take to dog ownership so easily. Sam shrugged. Didn't expect to either. But you did. He looked down at Chance, who was now sitting patiently beside him. Yeah, I guess I did. Lucy smiled. Well, I'd say you both got pretty lucky. Sam smirked but didn't argue. On the drive back home, Sam thought about what Lucy had said. Lucky. Maybe that was true, but it wasn't just luck. It was something else. Something deeper. That evening after dinner, Sam and Chance sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, casting a golden light over the yard. Chance stretched out beside Sam, his body completely at ease. Sam reached down, running a hand over Chance's fur. You really made yourself at home, huh? Chance lifted his head, giving Sam a slow blink before resting it back down on his paws. Sam chuckled. Yeah, me too. Sam woke up to the rhythmic sound of rain pattering against the roof. It wasn't a heavy downpour, just a steady drizzle that coated everything in a soft mist. He sat up, rubbing his face, and looked over at the small bundle curled up at the foot of the bed. Chance was still asleep, his paws tucked under him, his breath slow and steady. For a moment, Sam just watched him. The way his chest rose and fell, the slight twitch of his ears as he dreamed. It had been a long time since he had shared his space with someone, let alone awe. And yet, it felt completely normal now. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, stretching before standing. The house was quiet aside from the rain, but it was a good kind of quiet, peaceful. As he moved toward the kitchen, Chance stirred, blinking sleepily before standing and giving a long, exaggerated stretch. Sam chuckled. Morning, buddy. Chance wagged his tail lazily before following Sam to the kitchen, where he began preparing their usual breakfast routine. A bowl of kibble for Chance, coffee and toast for himself. As Sam sipped his coffee, he glanced out the window. The rain had darkened the wooden porch, and the yard was covered in shimmering droplets. Looks like we're stuck inside today, Sam muttered, glancing at Chance. The dog simply tilted his head, as if weighing his options. Eventually, he settled at Sam's feet, resting his head on his paws. Sam smirked. Guess that means we're having a lazy day. The morning passed slowly, the two of them moving about in their comfortable routine. Sam caught up on a book he had been meaning to finish, while Chance alternated between napping and gnawing on a chew toy. Every so often, Sam would glance down to find Chance watching him, his brown eyes warm and curious. By midday, the rain had lightened to a drizzle. Sam figured they could use a bit of fresh air. He stood, stretching. All right, let's get some air before we both go stir-crazy. Chance perked up immediately at the sound of movement, tail wagging as he trotted toward the door. Sam grabbed his rain jacket and clipped the leash onto Chance's collar before stepping outside. The air smelled fresh, the kind of scent that only came after a long rain. The ground was damp, puddles forming in dips in the road. Chance hesitated at first, sniffing at the wet ground, but soon enough he was trotting beside Sam with ease. They walked through town, the streets quieter than usual due to the rain. Sam nodded at the few people who passed, their faces familiar, as was the way in a small town. Chance was growing used to these outings, no longer flinching at passing cars or sudden noises. As they reached the diner, Sam saw Joe sitting under the awning, a cup of coffee in front of him. The old man waved them over. "Didn't think I'd see you out in this weather," Sam smirked, shrugging. "Figured we needed to stretch our legs." Joe glanced at Chance, who was sitting obediently beside Sam, his tail flicking slightly. "That dog of yours sure turned out all right. You ever think about training him further?" Sam raised an eyebrow. "Training?" Joe nodded. "Obedience, agility, maybe even therapy work. Dog like him, he's got a calm nature. Could do some good in town." He took a sip of his coffee. "There's a woman a couple towns over, runs a training center. Could be worth looking into." Sam glanced down at Chance, who was watching a raindrop roll down the pavement with quiet fascination. The idea had never crossed his mind before, but now that Joe had mentioned it, it didn't sound half bad. "I'll think about it," Sam said. Joe chuckled. "You do that. You two make a good team." The rest of the walk home, Sam mulled over the idea. Chance had already come so far. Maybe Joe was right. Maybe there was still more ahead for him. That evening, Sam pulled up a website on his laptop, scrolling through the details of the training center Joe had mentioned. It wasn't just basic obedience. There were specialized courses, including therapy dog certification. Sam leaned back in his chair, glancing over at Chance, who was sprawled out on his dog bed, chewing lazily on a stuffed toy. "You think you'd like that?" Sam mused, mostly to himself. "Helping people?" Chance looked up at him, his tail wagging once before he returned to gnawing on his toy. Sam chuckled. "Yeah, figures you wouldn't have an opinion." Still, the idea lingered. Chance had already proven he could handle new situations. He was calm, patient, and had a way of making people smile without even trying. Maybe this was something worth pursuing, not just for Chance, but for himself too. A few days later, Sam made the drive out to the training center. He didn't bring Chance this time. He just wanted to see what it was all about first. The facility was impressive, with open fields, agility courses, and instructors working with dogs of all breeds and sizes. One of the trainers, a woman named Claire, greeted him warmly. "So, what brings you here?" Sam hesitated for a second before answering. "Got a rescue dog, been thinking about training him further." Claire nodded. Rescues can make some of the best therapy dogs. They understand struggle, and that makes them more compassionate. Sam considered that. Chance had certainly been through enough hardship, but he had come out of it with a quiet strength. Maybe that was exactly what made him a good fit for this kind of work. Claire handed him a pamphlet. "We run an intro course for dogs new to training. If he does well, we can move on from there." Sam took the pamphlet, glancing at the listed dates. "I'll think about it." On the drive home, he found himself picturing Chance in a therapy vest, visiting hospitals or nursing homes, offering comfort the way only dogs could. It was a strange thought, but it didn't feel impossible. When he pulled into the driveway, Chance was waiting by the door, his tail wagging lazily. Sam crouched down, scratching behind his ears. "How do you feel about a new challenge, buddy?" Chance licked his hand, then trotted inside like he owned the place. Sam smirked. "Yeah, I figured you'd say that." The decision wasn't made yet, but something told him they were about to start another chapter, one that neither of them had expected. The training center was set just outside of a neighboring town, surrounded by fields and framed by the silhouettes of tall trees. On the day of the introductory session, Sam parked the truck under the shade of a large oak and looked over at Chance. The dog sat upright in the passenger seat, his head tilted slightly, as if trying to understand why they were here. "Ready for this?" Sam asked, his voice steady but light. Chance gave a soft wag of his tail. Sam chuckled. "All right, buddy, let's give it a shot." The facility itself was bustling with activity. Dogs of all shapes and sizes were walking with their handlers, some weaving through poles on agility courses, while others sat attentively, focused on their trainers. The air was filled with a mix of commands, laughter, and the occasional excited bark. Claire, the trainer Sam had met before, greeted them warmly. "Good to see you two again." Sam nodded. "We figured we'd give it a try." Claire crouched down to Chance's level, letting him sniff her hand. "He's a handsome one. Let's see how he does." The session began with simple exercises, walking in a straight line, sitting on command, short stays. Sam quickly realized that Chance, despite having no formal training, was picking up the cues with surprising ease. It was as if he was eager to please, watching Sam's hand movements and responding with a quiet, focused energy. By the end of the hour, Claire approached them, her smile wide. "You've got a natural on your hands." Sam scratched behind Chance's ears. "He's full of surprises." "If you're interested," Claire continued, "we can move him into the next level. Basic obedience with some introductory therapy dog tasks." Sam hesitated. He hadn't expected this to go so smoothly. "What does that involve?" "It's not too different from what we did today, just adding a bit more structure. Teaching him to stay calm around medical equipment, getting comfortable in hospital-like settings, and responding to people who might need a little extra comfort." She nodded toward a small group of boys lying calmly at the feet of a few handlers. "It's not just about commands, it's about personality, temperament, and he's got the right kind of spirit." Sam looked down at Chance, who was now sitting politely by his side, his tail wagging gently. "Sounds like it's worth a shot." Over the next few weeks, Sam found himself in a routine he hadn't anticipated. Twice a week, he and Chance drove out to the training center. The exercises grew more challenging, but Chance seemed to thrive on the work. He learned to walk beside a wheelchair without hesitation, to remain calm when a stranger approached him with an outstretched hand, and to lie quietly while someone read aloud from a book. Each time he completed a new task, Claire would smile and nod, her confidence in him never wavering. Sam noticed the changes not just in Chance, but in himself. Training sessions were something he looked forward to. He found himself smiling more, laughing at Chance's quirks, feeling a sense of pride when they nailed a new exercise. The bond between them deepened with each passing day. One day, Claire approached him after class. "There's an upcoming evaluation session," she said. "A chance for Chance," she grinned at her own wordplay, "to be officially certified as a therapy dog." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Certified?" Claire nodded. "It's not required for all therapy work, but it helps. It means he's met certain standards, that he's been trained to handle a variety of situations." Sam glanced down at Chance, who was lying at his feet, tail thumping softly against the floor. "You think he's ready for that?" "Absolutely." The evaluation day arrived quicker than Sam expected. The training center set up a series of tests designed to mimic the environments Chance might encounter in a hospital, a nursing home, or a school. There were volunteers playing the roles of patients and students, moving walkers and wheelchairs, laughing and talking. Sam felt a nervous energy as they began, but Chance was calm, focused. He walked beside Sam as they approached a volunteer sitting in a wheelchair. When she extended her hand, Chance gently rested his nose in her palm. He stayed still, quiet, as she spoke softly to him. Sam watched as the woman's face lit up, her smile genuine and warm. He hadn't expected to feel so moved by it. Chance passed each section of the evaluation without hesitation. By the end of the day, Claire approached them with a certificate in hand. "Congratulations, you've got yourself a certified therapy dog." Sam took the certificate, his throat tight with emotion. "Thanks," he managed, looking down at Chance. "Good job, buddy." Over the following months, Chance's new role transformed not only his life, but Sam's as well. They visited a local nursing home once a week where residents would light up at the sight of him. He'd sit beside them, resting his head on their knees, offering a quiet comfort that words couldn't. Sam often found himself moved by the moments he witnessed. A woman laughing for the first time in days. A man who rarely spoke suddenly talking to Chance as if they'd been friends for years. They started visiting the children's wing at a nearby hospital too. Chance would lie patiently beside a child's bed, his presence easing fears and bringing smiles. Parents would thank Sam, but he always pointed to Chance. "He's the one doing all the work," he'd say. At home, Chance was still the same dog he'd always been, playful, loving, full of quirks that made Sam laugh. But there was a newfound purpose in their days, a sense that they were part of something bigger. One evening, after a particularly long day, Sam sat on the porch with Chance at his side. The stars were just beginning to peek through the twilight sky. He leaned down, resting a hand on Chance's head. "You know," he said softly, "I didn't think we'd end up here." Chance tilted his head slightly, as if he understood. Sam smiled. "You've done more good than I ever thought possible. For them, sure, but also for me." Chance pressed closer, his warm presence a steady reassurance. Sam stared out into the quiet night, the realization settling in. This wasn't just a second chance for the dog he had found in a dumpster. It was a second chance for both of them.